My name is Chris Johnson, and this is Healthcare Tomorrow. Today we're joined by Aaron Roebuck from Breath Diagnostics. Aaron's come back to tell us a little bit more about the advances and some of the new stuff going on with Breath Diagnostics. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us back, Chris. This is great.
Absolutely. The one thing that we always like to do is really get to know our guests. Can you please go through a little bit of your academic background and, just what brought you to become president of Breath Diagnostics?
Absolutely. It's been quite a ride, quite a fun ride for me. It started out clinically for me way back when in '96 when I started out working as a respiratory therapist. In school, I actually started as a med tech major and then realized that I wouldn't get to see patients. It was all about just looking at lab data, running samples and everything. So I was fortunate. The school where I went to Salisbury University in Maryland, they had a respiratory therapy program. Didn't know anything about it. Had some respiratory disease in the family. I knew enough about asthma and some of those other diseases to pique my interest, and then realized I had an opportunity to really help patients and work with patients. So I took that on, loved what I did working with patients, and said I'd never go into management. Ended up being a manager of a respiratory therapy department. Said I'd never go into industry, ended up being a manager in industry, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But back to my respiratory therapy days, worked in a lot of adult facilities and then found I had a passion for working with the neonatal side. So with the NICU, the smallest of the most fragile patients, and all the respiratory diseases that they develop and can happen with premature birth. So I ended up working my way I live in the Maryland, D.C. area, have lived there most of my life, and went to Children's National to work not only in the NICU, but also doing some other things with transport and ECMO. So all of the crazy, fun things that you get to do working with patients. Ended up running the department there as a manager and then a director. What I also found a passion for is I got exposed to the research side of things. Ended up being a multidisciplinary group that I worked with as a research coordinator on the side of running the department. So got my feet wet with research, really understanding the ins and outs of research. That piqued my interest to see what was out there in the industry side. And from there got into what's the nitric oxide space, so working with drug and device combo, so not just a drug, not a device, but a combination device. And got into the point where not just doing education on that, but in industry got a chance to lead teams, work with sales and clinical, also get some exposure to research, and then the FDA and all the, wouldn't say challenges, but all of the guidance and everything you need to really get an approved device, a safe and approved device, and worked on next generation device approvals. Went from there to another company, drug and device, and worked for a while with that. Again, FDA approval, device design, human factors, really learning a lot of partnering with the FDA. Having the FDA in your backyard, I should say, living in Maryland, being able to actually visit and have on-site visits with the FDA and working with them, I learned a lot as well, and was given the opportunity with my previous company to really engage in the research side, but also the drug and device development side, while still running a team and still doing the clinical side. Through a mutual friend of mine, I met our CEO of Breath Diagnostics, Ivan Lowe, and Ivan introduced me to our CMO as well, Dr. Van Berkel, who was on our last show. And it really was, first off, brilliant people, but at the same time, a super exciting technology. So that's what sort of led me to where I am now. Really been a fun ride, and what's great about where our technology is and where we plan on taking it is all of the people that work in our company, whether it's the chemical engineers or the chemists, or again our CMO or our board that has several thoracic surgeons on it, or Ivan himself. We've got such a great and amazing team that it's really quite a partnership and really a great knowledgeable group.
It's quite a diverse background you have. I mean, if you think about the research emphasis combined with really all patient types. I mean, you're talking about pediatrics, which is really a whole different type of medicine. to really focus on, even to being at a major institution like Children's National. How does all that diversity in your background play into running a company?
It's great because as you just said, every age group has its own challenges. So you think you've got one thing nailed down and it's quite different. So it helps you learn to always be on your toes, always learning, being able to pivot with our company, even always knowing we have to be nimble and be ready to take on any opportunities, but also use what we've learned, but know that there might be something else completely different coming our way. And one thing I had forgotten to mention in my past that's also helped a lot, not just leading teams and working with teams, but also I was professor for a couple of years working with the respiratory therapy department. So you always had to stay on your toes and know more than your students. So always having learning and reading and seeing what the next thing is. So especially, it's hard to keep up these days, honestly, but really just trying to stay ahead of the game and learning what's next. There's so many advancements these days.
Considering where you live in the heart of the capital, the FDA's right there, your exposure to the regulatory environment, both at Children's National and then in industry, talk a little bit about what that's been like and kind of what you've learned.
Well, one of the great experiences I've had 2 opportunities to do on-site demonstrations at the FDA. So location kind of is everything. It's been really nice to be a 40-minute drive from my house, but it's a little different through an email or through a phone call than when you have a room of people engaged and learning about your device and talking through. So I'd say I learned a lot more in person, having lunch with some of the FDA employees and really learning what their jobs are. It makes my job a lot easier when I know what the FDA's true roles are and getting to know those people and what their daily life is and what they are trying to do. So it's been a huge help to learn from that. Other than just having those experiences, I've had a lot of engagement. For one of my companies, even did a lot of research was in Dublin quite a bit. And being able to take that knowledge out to that engineering team. So not just learning from the FDA, but also knowing how to share, I guess delicately sometimes with the engineering team, what the feedback is from the FDA. And we talked about earlier, being nimble and being able to pivot. You learn a lot from these interactions, and then how you're going to share that with the company, how you're going to share that with your employees to get to that next step.
So kind of talking about, that background, there are similarities and then there are differences between, obviously you're a diagnostic company compared to your background is more therapeutic in nature. What's the difference there? Have you had to learn any new tricks in order to feel comfortable within your new role?
It's interesting. It's a great question when you think of the job title, respiratory therapy, but that job has a lot of diagnostic with it, believe it or not. So whether it's blood samples or looking at chest x-rays or looking at what we call pulmonary function tests with kind of up our alley, which that is a breath test as well, a little bit different from what we do, but still. So I'd say about 50% of that job is diagnostic. It definitely is a little different, but at the same time, I'd say it's actually really helped learn in this space because most of what we do is diagnostic. And then the therapy part is based on that diagnosis. So you have to take that information, decide what you want to do with it, and that's how you treat your patients. So I'd say it's more 50-50 on that diagnostics versus therapeutics, and I've learned a ton. I think the background in respiratory therapy, and to your point, the diverse nature of the different patient types has been super helpful to prepare to lead this company and where we're going to go in the future of our diagnostic platform.
So with your research background, both academically or in the hospital, and then, I'm sure you were teaching a lot of that as a professor. Where do you feel like that, is that a major strength of yours, being a leader in an organization today, or how does that help you?
I think definitely the teaching part helped me learn a lot, again, because you need to know more than your students do. But I would say more on working in the industry side and leading teams has been the biggest help. Or honestly, working even at Children's National, leading a team every day of about 180 respiratory therapists working there. It's been 180, 160, about 20 or 25 respiratory therapists per shift. Having to lead that team and then going into industry and leading another team, I've sort of learned the strengths and weaknesses on both sides, but I would say those were super helpful to be able to know how to communicate with everybody and their roles to honestly get the job done. So I'd say the industry side definitely has helped from a leadership standpoint, but you're absolutely right. From a respiratory therapy standpoint and a teaching standpoint, you're always leading, you're always driving. And again, the main thing is to not stop learning yourself. I think that's been the big thing that I've learned from it. It's really helped me get to where I am now.
So as a president, obviously you're working with a board to raise money and investors trying to get everything to market. Tell us a little bit about some of that activity and what you're doing right now.
Absolutely. We're super excited about our technology. That being said, to your point, we need to raise money and we're ready to raise money. We have a Reg CF right now through Equifund that we're raising. We're confident in getting that money in very quickly, and that Reg CF is currently open on Equifund.
Fantastic. I'm sure that we can put some links in the podcast notes for anyone interested.
Outstanding.
So we're back from break, and I want to thank both of you for coming in today and spending some time with us and sharing all the new advances with where breath diagnostics is going. This is a really different path. I mean, this is really a different solution compared to the oncology path that you were taking before. So let's talk a little bit about, where you're going with, and I don't want to say the word because I don't want to steal the thunder, but what has your research shown?
Yeah, so we've had some exciting stuff come out in just the last little bit. So I have, at the University of Louisville, I have a pig lab where I work on a variety of different projects, mostly related to lung transplant. And one of the things that I was doing to try to work on for transplant was pneumonia. And so spent some time trying to give pigs pneumonia, which, as it turns out, is quite challenging. They are hardy little guys. So it took us a while to get it right, but we finally got to a point where we could take 60 kilogram pigs, so pigs that have lungs about the same size as a human, and give them a pretty bad pneumonia. And while we were working on a different project, I thought, well, we have the chips, why don't we take a look and see if we can diagnose pneumonia out of the breath of these pigs. And so we did that. So we took a bunch of pigs and gave them pneumonia, and had some pigs where we did a sham experiment and then collected breath and saw that there was one biomarker in particular that really jumped up as the pigs got sick. And then interestingly, there were some pigs that got sick and then would get better. And we would see that biomarker would start to go up and then go right back down again. So it really did look like it was tracking well with the pneumonia. And that got us excited about seeing whether or not we'd be able to use that in humans. And so what we started doing was capturing breath from patients who were coming in to have elective cardiac operations. So obviously a heart operation is a big operation. And we know that with that operation, about 10% of the people who have the operation end up getting a pneumonia afterwards. And that's a big problem. One, obviously it can be fatal for patients. At a minimum, it ends up slowing down their time in the hospital, keeping them in the hospital longer, keeping them in the ICU longer, and making it just more challenging for them to get better from their operation. And so we thought this would be a good population for us to look at. So we started collecting breath from patients in the pre-op area, like before their operation, immediately after their operation, and then every few days while they were in the hospital. And of the patients that we looked at, about 10% of them ended up getting pneumonias, which is what we expected. And we found two things that were really interesting. The first is that we could diagnose pneumonia based off of the breath. We could see that there were changes that happened in the breath as people started getting sick. But the more interesting thing, I thought, was that if we looked at the breath preoperatively. So people just walking in off the street, getting ready to have their operation, before anything is done to them, if we looked at the breath of those patients, we could predict from that breath who was going to end up getting pneumonia. And that, I think, is incredibly exciting because that gives us the opportunity to intervene before they get sick. And so, this is very preliminary data. We are in the process of validating that and getting more patients. But we have a pretty good data set. And like I said, the data is pretty convincing. So our hope is that if this holds up and we can actually predict who's going to be getting pneumonia beforehand, then we say, okay, if you're coming in for a heart operation, you're coming in for a big operation, you get a breath test. And if you come out as being high risk for developing pneumonia, then we give you some antibiotics. We give you, everybody when they have an operation gets some antibiotics around the time of the operation, but giving you either a more extended course or a broader coverage of antibiotics and see if we can keep those pneumonias from happening. And if we can do that, that's one, going to have a big impact on those patients, but obviously two, from the hospital standpoint, then we keep those people from having these extended lengths of stay that end up getting very expensive for the hospital. So this is an exciting finding for us that we're really enthusiastic about kind of pushing forward.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't imagine what this would do to length of stay. I mean, there's so many different factors that come in line with the amount of patients that have pneumonia in the hospital, whether they come through the ER and they're already there, or they come in and it's a hospital acquired, and we go through all of that. So from a commercial standpoint, as someone that's trying to think through what that looks like for the organization, kind of what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's last time we spoke and you asked us about our technology. Super excited still about our lung cancer data, but we said we were a platform technology. So as Victor does, it was, hey, let's see what else we can find. And when you talk about pneumonia and lung cancer, if you and I get on a call and you tell me you have lung cancer, that's a pretty tough conversation. You tell me you have pneumonia, I say I hope you feel better. But to Victor's point, when we're talking about the hospital, it's a game changer. And we spoke a little bit about some of my background as a respiratory therapist. I can't tell you how many multidisciplinary committees, I assume Victor as well, has been on for preventing pneumonia in a hospital. It's a big deal. And Chris, you nailed it, length of stay. If you go in for a procedure, whatever that cardiac surgery is, 5 day, 6 day stay, whatever that is, and now that's complicated by a pneumonia and your length of stay starts to grow. The hospitals want to get you out. Now you run into insurance issues. Who's going to pay for that? Was this a hospital-acquired pneumonia? So to be able to predict, not just detect, but predict is a huge thing. So when you look at it from a market standpoint, our focus would be, and I think Victor touched on this, is to do a pre-op breath test. And then if you can identify this patient's going to most likely get a pneumonia, and then treat and decrease that length of stay, what we would do is we'd really market that to the hospitals. And from a reimbursement standpoint, I see a very easy path forward with that for the companies. Kind of a win-win, if you will. Hospitals can hopefully decrease that length of stay, not have that as many pneumonia cases potentially. And then from an insurance standpoint, we're not dealing with that. What's that pay look like for these long extended stays? So we see a really good path forward, especially as a pre-op breath test.
It also seems like it opens up beds. I mean, for the patients that need it. It's amazing to me, right here in the Research Triangle, we've got fantastic hospitals everywhere, but they get full. And you end up being sent to Charlotte or another hospital that's an hour and a half away because they just run out of beds.
That's the main reason why we end up canceling cases is, someone's coming in for an elective heart operation, which is it's a big deal. You don't want to put that off, but if we don't have anywhere to put them, then you have to wait. So throughput in the hospital it's not just about money, it's about patient care as well, and being able to continue to take care of the people who need it. And so that's doing what we can to help alleviate those downstream issues. I think can have a lot of positive benefit.
So let's talk about the process to make this a reality. What does that look like? I mean, from a research standpoint to bringing it to market commercially, what has to get done in order for hospitals to be able to start using your test?
Well, for sure, the first thing we need is more data. Like I said, I think our initial results are very promising, but we, like anything else, we need more numbers to make sure that we're not being fooled by something. But from a regulatory standpoint, the interesting thing is there's not really anything for us to compare to. There isn't anything else that has a predictive capacity for someone. There are risk calculators that people use, to say, okay, what is, given someone's age and weight and all sorts of other comorbidities, what is the likelihood that something bad is going to happen to them? But nothing that specifically looks at, okay, this is your risk of developing a pneumonia. And so that puts us in a unique position because there's nothing for us to compare to. And so from the point of view of the FDA, that puts us in an interesting area that's called breakthrough designation, where we have the opportunity to get kind of an expedited process through the FDA for something that really is brand new, essentially.
Well, it just seems to me that safety is not a concern, because all we're doing is we're a patient's blowing into a balloon. This is a diagnostic, so we're not worried necessarily about the word efficacy. Really, can you truly predict? And it's non-invasive to find that out. Yeah. So it seems to me like this is a pretty smooth opportunity here to do a lot of good without having nearly the number of obstacles that people normally have to jump and hurdle to get to the end.
Sure. So for example, looking at our test for lung cancer, from the FDA's perspective, that's a high-risk test, right? Because obviously, if I test you and say, don't worry, you don't have cancer, and I'm wrong about that, that's a serious problem, right? And so the requirements for getting approval for something like that are very stringent, as they should be. Like that should be a difficult thing. And so our upcoming trial looking at our technology for diagnosing lung cancer is going to be huge. We're going to have to look at a lot of patients. This is going to be a very involved process. For this, like you said, this is a much safer question, because essentially we're saying this is a person who's at higher risk of having something bad happen to them. And even the intervention, antibiotics are not benign, and I don't want to trivialize, we don't obviously want to just put everybody on more antibiotics. That's going to be bad too. But I think if we can target those folks, the downside is very, very low. And so you're right. I think from a regulatory standpoint, I think the hurdles that need to be cleared for someone to say this is a safe thing to do is pretty low.
Yeah, Chris, and then when you look at the timeline for that too, especially with Victor talking about potential breakthrough designation, one of the great things with breakthrough designation is the FDA really becomes a partner of yours. They work with you through every step, but also the timeline would be quite shortened for a pneumonia trial. The follow-up there, you either developed pneumonia or you did not, so there's not a long follow-up for the trial, so timeline would be really reduced and could get to market pretty quick.
So I hear more and more about AI-driven trials, looking at being able to run numbers in more of a mock situation. Would that be kind of a first pass effect here, where you could let the modeling play out to really give you a good phase 2 before you really go with a major investment?
Well, I certainly think the use of AI is what's helped us pick out the patterns that are allowing us to diagnose pneumonia. And I think it is, we talked the last time we came together about how, from a lung cancer standpoint, this all started before that AI analysis was available. And now we're really taking advantage of the kind of deeper data analysis that we can do with AI, and that's facilitated some of this process. It also does, purely from a numbers standpoint, mean that you can reduce the number of patients that you need to look at, because there's some fancy math that you can do essentially where you take a certain set of population that you have data on and break it into pieces and do different training programs for the AI and different validation sets. So it does facilitate that to a certain degree. But really what I would say is that the AI is what's made it possible for us to identify the patterns that we need for making these diagnoses.
So have you had any discussions, and I know that this is all so new and so cutting, but have you had any hospital leadership discussions on kind of their feedback and what they say?
So the preliminary discussions we've had, at least at our hospital, they're very excited about it because I think that they see the value of avoiding some of these infections. They're hospital administrators, so they're reluctant to jump on any train that comes along. And I think that we're going to need to work a little bit to prove to them that the data is as good as we think it is. But at least at our institution, they're enthusiastic that this is going to make a difference for them.
So then there's always the, in any process trying to bring a product to market, the how do you pay for it? And I guess my question is, where are you right now with that? And is there a plan already in place, or where could someone go to be involved in investing?
I'll tell you the plan in place first off, when you're kind of looking at a business model,
right?
The way you would look at that for hospitals, again, keep bringing up length of stay, but if you can show a true way to decrease length of stay, detect this pneumonia early, or predict, I should say, not detect, but predict this pneumonia. For that, as far as hospitals, we would see purchasing the breath tests, and then from there, getting the insurance reimbursement from there. So that would sort of be our model. But from that, if the data does hold true to where we are, I don't see how this doesn't take off as far as that goes from that standpoint. And then as far as from an investing standpoint, we mentioned previously, we do have currently the Reg CF open. So from an investment standpoint, that's how investors could get involved.
So this is you've been doing this for 10 years.
Yeah.
And just like that, you've got a true platform. So the initial excitement over the first path generates a lot of understanding to create a second path. Are you looking at a third or a fourth? I mean, I know you're not going to tell me details, but from the samples you've collected, is there anything else?
So I think I would say that we have some very anecdotal evidence looking at a couple of other potential utilities. As excited as I am about it, it would be premature really to put a lot of emphasis on that. But I think that it is true. We were hopeful at the beginning that this would be, like you say, a platform that would allow us to look at a bunch of different disease processes. And I think the farther along we're getting with that, the more true we're realizing that is going to be.
I kind of go back in time and I think about when we started drawing blood to look at all the different key indicators of how the patient was doing.
Sure.
And
we're still finding new stuff.
Right. And
Yeah.
what is that overall picture from taking one draw of blood look like? And this is kind of the same scenario. You're taking a sample of breath, and we are just adding to what we know about patients' health by looking and diagnosing them through their breath. We are healthcare tomorrow, and we're looking at where are we in 5-10 years. So Where do you see the breath as an avenue of diagnosing diseases and potential problems for patients? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, I'll just say, as long as you can stabilize that breath, which we have nailed, we've knocked that down where you can get that breath stable so you're not breaking up those precious volatile organic compounds that we're getting. I think the sky's the limit as far as a platform technology. And we've spoken before as far as it would be great to say, did you get your breath test this year? And then not just here are the few things that you can test, but adding more and more things as we go. I mean, and then you and Victor were just talking about AI as well, and these learning models to help us even enhance the sensitivity and specificity of this diagnosis. So I truly think it could be keep growing and adding more and more diseases as we go. So we're always looking.
Yeah, and the hope would be that it is a useful enough tool that 10 years from now, when you go to your primary care physician, this is just one of the things that you do, that you breathe in a bag, and that lets him or her know, okay, these are the things that we need to worry about. Like, we need to be worried about heart failure in this person, or we need to be worried about COPD or cancer of one sort or another, and help direct both the further diagnostic tests, but also whatever therapy might be needed.
So going back to a word that you said, and that's stable. So when you think about, to you in that statement, stability was kind of the cornerstone of your device. Is that right?
As far as the you're right. As far as the microreactor goes, what you breathe into the bag, but then you're collecting that breath on our patented microchip or our microreactor. Stabilization is everything. You have to have a way that is a stable sample to run all those VOCs. It's hard to test that if you're breaking them down. Again, that's where our technology is unique, or we don't have that thermal degradation that you can get from using thermal desorption tubes. So patented technology is key to, yes, you want to collect these VOCs, but you need to make sure what you've collected can actually get run and sampled correctly. So absolutely, stability is key, and that's something we really have nailed down.
It's incredible. Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think of, when you're presenting this data to hospital executives that for years have been paying for patients that just stay forever and don't ever leave the hospital because of exactly what we're talking about. It really does improve not just the overall financial situation, but it seems like the reputation of every hospital would go up because patients wouldn't be in there very long. So that's great. Tell me anything that you want to tell me regarding pneumonia and breath diagnostics and where you're going with this path. I mean, is there anything we haven't discussed that you really think the audience should know?
I don't know. I feel like we've covered a lot of the important parts. I think perhaps the reason that we wanted to come and talk to you again is because of our excitement about this, and that we think that this is, we talk about this in the company a great deal. Obviously, lung cancer is the thing that gets most of us up in the morning. Like, this is the problem that we have committed a lot of our lives to dealing with. But when we have this technology to deal with that particular problem, and we know that we can take that technology, work on a different problem, and actually get farther down the commercialization developmental pathway easier and faster with that, that's only going to help us take the lung cancer picture forward. And so I think this was excitement, the validation of this being a platform, but also in terms of what it will mean for our company in terms of our ability to take the next steps with the other projects that we're excited about. I think that's really what has gotten us all a little worked up about this.
That's fantastic. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I think we'll wrap it up. I really appreciate the time you spent to come and share all of this with myself and the audience. I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes, because I have a sneaky suspicion that we'll get together in the future and talk about a third pathway with what is happening with your company. So anyway, take care.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.